There's a moment every man remembers. The moment he cared too much. He replied too fast, thought too deeply, loved too openly, and slowly watched her pull away. Not because he was ugly, not because he wasn't enough, but because somewhere in his desperation to be chosen, he abandoned himself, and that is the part nobody talks about. Because the painful truth is this: the more emotionally dependent a man becomes, the less attractive he appears. Not always, but often enough to leave scars. You've probably seen it before. The man who gives endless attention gets ignored. The man who stays calm, detached, focused on his purpose, somehow becomes unforgettable. Why? Why are women often drawn toward men who seem emotionally unaffected? Is it cruelty, ego, psychology, or something much deeper hidden inside human nature itself? Stay until the end, because the final lesson may completely change the way you see attraction, emotions, masculinity, and your own self-worth. And if somewhere in this video you feel understood, subscribe, like the video, and keep walking this path with us, because this conversation is not really about women, it's about power, inner power, and most men lose it long before they realize they had it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that a man's worth is measured by the worth of what he gives his attention to. Most men today give their attention away like beggars throwing coins into the street. Constant texting, constant validation, constant fear of losing someone, and women can feel that fear instantly. Not because they are evil, but because human beings are naturally drawn toward emotional certainty. A man who cannot control his emotions feels unstable. A man who revolves his life around another person unconsciously communicates weakness, and weakness is rarely attractive. But here's where men misunderstand everything. The man women become obsessed with is not the man who pretends not to care. It's the man whose happiness does not depend on external approval. There's a difference, a dangerous difference. One is manipulation, the other is freedom, and women can feel the difference without even understanding why. You see, when a man desperately needs attention, he begins performing. He edits himself. He becomes agreeable, too available, too accommodating, too emotionally reactive. He loses the sharp edges that made him interesting in the first place. But the man who is grounded in himself, he doesn't chase, not because he's cold, because he has a life worth returning to. Purpose, discipline, silence, peace, and peace is rare, especially today. That rarity becomes magnetic. Think about the men you've seen who naturally attract people. They usually aren't the loudest. They aren't begging for validation. They don't over-explain themselves. There's something calm about them, something emotionally controlled, almost dangerous. Because emotionally stable people cannot be manipulated easily, and that threatens insecure minds. Marcus Aurelius understood this centuries ago. He knew attachment creates suffering when your identity becomes dependent on things outside your control, and nothing exposes this more brutally than modern relationships. Most men don't actually love. They attach. There's a difference. Love is calm. Attachment is panic. Love says, I appreciate you. Attachment says, without you, I am nothing. One creates connection. The other creates pressure, and pressure suffocates attraction. This is why men who constantly seek reassurance often push people away without realizing it. Do you still love me? Why are you acting different? Who are you texting? Why didn't you reply? At first it sounds like care, but underneath it is fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being enough. And fear changes your energy. People can feel it before you even speak. That's why the Stoics valued emotional discipline above almost everything. Not because emotions are bad, but because uncontrolled emotions make you easy to destroy. The man who cannot sit alone with his thoughts becomes addicted to distraction. The man who cannot handle rejection becomes addicted to approval. And the man addicted to approval will sacrifice his dignity for temporary affection. That is where self-respect dies. Quietly, Not in one dramatic moment, but in hundreds of tiny betrayals, against yourself, replying when you should walk away, begging when you should accept reality, explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, and every time you abandon your self-respect, something inside you weakens. Women notice that weakness, not consciously all the time, but emotionally. Because confidence is not words. Confidence is emotional independence. It's the ability to lose something and still remain whole. That energy changes everything. The strange thing is, the less a man needs validation, the more valuable his attention becomes. Because attention from a desperate man means nothing. He gives it to everyone. But attention from a disciplined man, a man focused on his mission, a man who protects his peace, that attention feels earned, and humans value what feels rare. This is why silence is powerful, not silent games, not manipulation, real silence. The silence of someone who no longer feels the need to prove himself. There's something deeply unsettling about a man who stays calm after rejection, not because he feels nothing, but because he refuses to collapse emotionally. Most people expect emotional chaos. They expect begging, anger, overreaction. But emotional control creates mystery, and mystery creates attraction. Because people become obsessed with what they cannot emotionally dominate. That's the irony. The man who fears losing. Women usually loses them. The man who remains centered in himself often becomes unforgettable. But this comes with loneliness. A loneliness most men are not prepared for. Because once you stop chasing validation, the world becomes quieter. You begin noticing how many relationships were built only on emotional dependency. How many conversations existed only to avoid silence. How many people loved attention more than connection. That realization hurts. Deeply. There are nights where you will feel invisible. Moments where you question if emotional discipline is turning you cold. But Stoicism was never about becoming emotionless. It was about becoming unshakable. There's a difference. An unshakable man still feels pain he still loves deeply, still gets disappointed, still experiences heartbreak, but he does not allow pain to control his identity. That is true masculine energy, not aggression, not dominance. Control, a calm mind in emotional chaos. Most modern men have never been taught this. They were taught to impress people, not master themselves, and that's why rejection destroys them. Because rejection forces a terrifying question. If I am not chosen, am I still valuable? Most people spend their entire lives running from that question. Stoicism forces you to face it directly, and once you do, something changes inside you. You stop trying to convince people to stay. You stop over-explaining your worth. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's emotional confusion, because you finally understand something powerful. Real attraction begins where desperation ends. Women are not attracted to men who don't care. They are attracted to men who are emotionally self-contained. Men who can enjoy love without worshiping it. Men who can experience connection without losing themselves inside it. That kind of man feels safe. Not safe because he's soft. Safe because he is stable. His emotions are not chaotic. His attention is not cheap. His life does not revolve around approval. And stability is rare in a world addicted to emotional extremes. Look around. People are constantly reacting, posting for validation, texting from anxiety, arguing from insecurity, cheating from emptiness. Everyone wants attention. Very few have inner peace. That's why stillness feels powerful now. A man who can sit quietly without needing constant stimulation unconsciously communicates strength. Because discipline always reveals itself in energy. You can hear it in the way he speaks. See it in the way he walks away. Feel it in the way he doesn't beg. And yes, sometimes this makes people project cruel labels onto him. Emotionally unavailable. Too distant. Too hard to read. But often what they really mean is, I cannot control his emotions. That frustrates people, especially in relationships built on emotional games. The Stoic man does not chase emotional highs. He seeks clarity, and clarity changes how you see attraction itself. You realize many people are not in love with you. They are in love with how you make them feel about themselves. The attention, the reassurance, the certainty. Remove those things, and their feelings disappear. That realization can make you cynical if you're not careful. But Marcus Aurelius warned against bitterness, because bitterness is just wounded attachment pretending to be wisdom. True strength is remaining open-hearted without becoming emotionally dependent. That balance is rare. Most men swing between extremes, either emotionally needy or emotionally numb. But the strongest men are neither. They love fully while remaining grounded in themselves. They can walk away without hatred. They can be alone without feeling incomplete. And that energy changes relationships completely, because once a woman realizes your entire identity does not depend on her presence, she experiences you differently. Your words carry more weight. Your silence becomes louder. Your attention becomes meaningful, not because you are playing games, because your life finally has gravity. Purpose creates gravity. That's why lost men obsess over relationships, and purposeful men inspire attraction naturally. A man without direction searches for meaning inside people. A man with direction invites people into his world. Massive difference. And women feel that difference immediately. This is why the Stoics constantly emphasized mission, discipline, routine, and self-mastery, because a distracted man becomes emotionally weak, but a disciplined man develops inner structure, and inner structure creates emotional stability. Wake up early, train your body, control your impulses, learn silence, stop reacting instantly to everything, not because these things magically attract women, but because they rebuild your relationship with yourself. And once a man respects himself deeply, the world responds differently to him, including women. People can sense when someone no longer tolerates disrespect, not through aggression, through standards, quiet standards. That's another thing nobody tells men. The man who fears loneliness accepts emotional crumbs, but the man who has learned to survive solitude becomes impossible to manipulate, because manipulation only works on people terrified of losing something. And once you are no longer terrified, your entire presence changes. Your conversations become calmer. Your emotions become cleaner. Your relationships become healthier. And strangely enough, that is often when attraction finally appears naturally, not when you're chasing it, but when you no longer need it to feel complete. That's the paradox. The less you chase validation, the more valuable you become. The less you beg for attention, the more your attention matters. The less emotionally reactive you are, the more emotionally powerful you become. Not because people enjoy coldness, because emotional control signals inner strength. And deep down, human beings are always searching for strength. Not fake alpha behavior, not arrogance. Real strength. The kind built in silence. The kind built through heartbreak, rejection, loneliness, self-control. The kind of strength nobody applauds while you're building it, but everyone notices once you have it. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Women are not attracted to men who don't care. They are attracted to men who do not abandon themselves for love. There's wisdom in that. Dangerous wisdom. Because once you truly understand it, you stop chasing people who require you to lose your dignity just to keep them. You stop performing for affection. You stop begging to be chosen. And for the first time in your life, you choose yourself. That is where peace begins. And strangely enough, that is also where attraction begins. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.